You have to get yourself.
Well, hello.
So with recent events, especially as it's been escalating with the somewhat of a war between police and minority groups, there's a lot of information that people don't have that they need to be aware of. And this is going to cover most of those things, where how it turned from police being someone who protects us to perceived as somebody who we need to fight against. So first we're going to talk about the eras of policing, which is how the relationship between the police and the public is. Then we're going to look at how the media influenced that, and then the tactics or the perceptions, how they're different based on where the police work is happening. So this is Sir Robert Peel. He was the founder of policing in England in 1822. It was introduced to the US in Boston. It's about 15 years later. And then the first organized police force was in New York in 1845 and the second in Chicago in 1851. And this is all the eras are from the administration of justice. So the first era was when it was completely run by the political figures. You had whoever was in charge was telling the police exactly what to do, and they were basing everything off of their very, very personal views. Some people might argue that this is still going on today, but it was far more extreme in the 1840s to the 1930s. The Reform era was, you'll note that it's around the time when the Civil Rights Movement happened or when the Women's Rights Movement happened. And what was going on during this time in the police itself was the Vollmer's reform, where August Vollmer noticed that there were so many issues with the police following how the political figures wanted them to, and just doing whatever it was that the political party said, or the mayor, or whoever. So he started implementing all these ways that the police could work at a more community level, which brought us to the 1970s till today of the community era, where they started taking oaths where they were going to protect the community specifically. The 2001, or more specifically September 11th, 2001, till today started the Homeland Security movement after the attack in New York. They saw more of a need for police officers to be trained on how to handle bomb threats or any sort of terrorist threats. So you'll notice that I put present day in quotations in the community era because in the 90s, there was an eruption of cop hatred that started because people were remembering or seeing how the political influence was still there in especially the major cities, the ones that had the longest time to develop that political structure. So it became more of a portrayal, like looking at this from the civil rights movement, where it's very obvious that the police were discriminating. It turned into this idea that there was no good cops, that cops as a whole were just a bunch of people that had a god complex and they just wanted to have power. They completely overlooked people like this, who were doing everything that they were supposed to, and even going above and beyond, reporting any sort of corruption that they saw in their fellow police officers. But people don't want to hear about this, they just want to hear about all the stories of discrimination. And then you had figures like Tupac, who talked a lot about hating cops when, in essence, his belief was that there are good and bad cops. But you get all of the, there's a song by Dr. Dre that is all about killing cops, and there's all sorts of rappers, especially in LA, that erupted all these hatred towards cops, and then the media gets a good story out of all the negative imagery, so they'll take any story of something terrible happening and make it seem like it's a huge epidemic. So then you have in movies where if you'll notice, you probably don't really think about it while you're watching the movie, but the police officers are expendable characters, or they're the ones driven by money, the evil characters. So you have all sorts of situations where the bad guy goes and just starts taking out all the cops, and they're not seen as humans. It's kind of like they're seen as civilians, but they're seen as, like, they're more often the ones getting killed. But nobody wants to look at it like that. They've kind of got this perception that cops are expendable, that they're just a uniform, they're not really a person. So this idea of racist cops, you can't really see the numbers on this, but I'll explain them to you. It's talking about on the one side you have the race of the victim, the top area is for homicides, and then the race of the offender. So out of 3,000 murders, 2,500 of them were white people that were doing the murdering, and they were murdering other white people. And then 400 of the white people being killed were by African Americans. So it's a completely, they estimate it's about 80% of violence is between the same race. So of course you're going to have those racists, about 400 racists there, that are attacking someone possibly because they just hate them for their race. And some of those people are going to be cops. But then similarly, you got in the African American section, 2,500 murders, only about 200 of them were committed by white people, and then the other 2,200 were by other African Americans. This came directly out of the violent crime statistics for the FBI. And this is the reporting. There are some areas where it could be potentially wrong because of over or under reporting by the police departments, but this is the most accurate way they found to find these statistics. Then, if you look into the region, the broken windows theory was developed in 1982 by James Q. Wilson and George Kelling. And it's the idea that where there are places that look run down, there's going to be more crime. So the places that have the most graffiti, the places that have broken windows, have been shown by numerous studies that they have more crime in the area. So, of course, you're going to have more police officers stationed there, and unfortunately, people in poverty are going to be the ones living there, and a lot of people in poverty happen to be of minority groups. So you're going to get a lot more arrests of people from minority groups because they're living in the area where the most crime is happening. Which is unfortunate, but that's kind of one of the results of this. Then you also have, this study was done in New York, and they have one of the oldest police forces, or they have the oldest police force. So they've had a lot of time to develop this political structure, and if this political structure included racism, it's going to take a while to get rid of that. Similarly, you're more likely to find a racist in the South, so of course you're going to find a racist cop in the South. It's this idea that cops are separate from the rest of the public that's caused a lot of the issues. I have a friend from New York who's also mentioned that now in New York, it's not really about what color you are, it's about how much money you have. So it's become an issue of classism rather than racism. You have these cops that are getting a lot of money for busting these big drug dealers, so they're going to go attack everyone even close to the drug dealers, and a lot of those also happen to be racial minorities or people of lower classes. So just to go over that again, you've got the eras of policing, which are the political reform, community, where the rise of the cop haters came, homeland security, then you've got how the media portrayed the cops, and then cop policies and procedures by region. But despite all this, like, it's not fair to say that all cops are evil, and it's not fair to take them apart from the society and make them a race of their own or a group of their own. It's kind of a time when everybody just needs to come together, and as you've seen before, Blue Lives Matter too. So that's what I have. And is there any questions?
Do you have a solution?
I think a good solution, particularly to get rid of the racism, is if you had like African Americans or Hispanics like documenting if they have a run-in with a cop that treats them in a way that they don't like, if they get their name, if they ask the police officer, why are you pulling me over, why are you questioning me, they are expected to answer that. And if the police officer doesn't, they've got a name badge. Write it down, write down their name, get together with other people that have had those situations, and if you have the same name coming up over and over again, report them to the police department, report them to their superiors. If the superiors don't take it seriously, report it to the FBI, because the FBI is notorious for getting rid of tons and tons of police officers for corruption. Any other questions?
I was gonna ask, how did it evolve from kind of the eras before the police were organized? How did it evolve from militias and military forces to becoming organized civil police forces versus just militaries?
So Sir Robert Peel kind of took the idea of protection. Mostly it was the job of like the father or the figure of the home to protect the people. But he kind of noticed that you could take that. It didn't really evolve from military. He just noticed that you could have people that were professionally able to protect the people. They got a little more training, so it wasn't just whatever strength the father had that was protecting his family. It was the strength of the individual that was patrolling the area. So, and that's kind of how that started. It was this idea that if you have somebody who is expected to do this as their job and they're getting paid for it, they're getting compensation, that there's going to be a more effective protection in the community. All right, well, if there's no other questions, that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Yay.
Yay.